Yeah, you kind of get used to it over what this is episode 53.
Damn. Okay.
So, I mean, you kind of get used to it over time. I still I used to not be able to like watch over the podcast, but I mean, you just kind of get used to it, like I said.
I feel you.
But, yeah, man. So how's everything going for you lately?
It's going well,
Yeah.
man. Super busy right now with football and, just trying to get through the grind of the season. But it's been good, man.
Yeah. I want to.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, I'm sitting down with Andrew Macias, Coach Andrew Macias. So right now you are currently the offensive coordinator at Dorado High School
Yes, sir.
here in El Paso, Texas. But our story is the way I met Coach Macias is he was my coach at Andress for my freshman and sophomore year when I played football. And we built like a really great relationship. Really, I would say like as far as all the football coaches, I would consider you probably the one where like I could really just go to anything for, like it felt like I don't know, like I always think about this because obviously I had other good coaches, but I feel like you were before a coach and before football, you were just someone that we can go to before
Right.
anything.
And honestly, and that was one thing I took pride in, man. I wanted to be that guy for you guys. I was, blessed and fortunate to have had, great coaches that I played for, and Coach Mack. Shout out to Coach Mack, and a guy like that. I wanted to, be that type of influence for you guys, and hopefully, lead you guys in the right direction as football players. So, as student athletes, but I mean, with a guy like you, man, it was too easy. Just
Appreciate
a
it.
great kid and a guy that worked hard and, a coach's dream essentially. So
Yeah.
nah,
And one of the defining moments, like that kind of like really just set that in stone was, I remember like it was a very like, in the grand scheme of things, it's not the biggest thing, but at that time, it felt like a really big decision for me to not play football anymore. Mainly just because I don't know, I wasn't necessarily happy. I think I was kind of struggling a lot mentally during that time for whatever reason, but it was a really hard decision. Like my dad ended up like having to intervene and kind of help me do that and kind of make that leap. Because as you know, like high school football, it's very serious, especially here in Texas, and like just I feel like when you end up leaving, you can kind of get a little bit of um, if you say like I guess backlash a little bit. Maybe if it's not from the coaches, maybe from like other teammates, like why you
right.
quit in like especially when it's football. But one thing I remember was out of all the coaches, like even though you were maybe a little bit shocked or kind of like disappointed by the like decision, more than anything, you were just like you were one of the only ones that was just like, you know what, like I feel like you're gonna do good no matter what. So
And what's crazy about that is I genuinely remember that conversation.
yeah.
And I remember like, you're right. I mean, a kid like you doesn't come around very often, and your coach's dream, and you were your guy that did everything right. But at the same time, like I recognized that you had a ton of potential in basketball. I knew that was where your heart was at. So, my job is to guide you and lead you in the right way, and obviously support you. And we're not just in it for obviously just you playing football. And it was hey, we're in it for it's a life thing. So yeah, and I was it was sad to see you go, but I was definitely excited. Just that knowing that you're gonna be just fine. You know what I mean? You're gonna be just fine. So
For sure.
yeah.
And did you get that from like was that instilled in you as a coach when you first started, or did you kind of have a coach like that you kind of remember that you kind of wanted to emulate, or was that just like who you are?
You know what, man? Like I said, I've been blessed, man. I've been blessed to have been around a lot of great coaches. Like I said, it was definitely something. Relationships that, I mean, at the end of the day, that's why we're in this business. You know what I mean? So relationships are everything to me. So for me, it was, if what I was saying was the fact that I loved you and I cared about you and I care about your future, then obviously I'm going to support whatever you decide to do. You know what I mean? So if you decide to, step away from football, then, I'm all for that. I'm going to be your biggest supporter when you, obviously on the basketball court, I love going and watching you play and stuff like that. But absolutely, man, it was, and I mean, you being the type of kid that you were, I knew where your heart was. I knew exactly, it wasn't I'm being a quitter type thing. It had nothing to do with that. Obviously you're making a decision in the best interest of where you were at in life and where you wanted to do. So I was going to support you, man. So I was excited to see you obviously excel in basketball and do your thing. And not to mention, man, you were a top 10, right? You were a
top 2% actually.
Top 2%, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you did your thing academically, man. So and man, it was a relationship that, like I said, I took pride in with you. And that doesn't happen very often. I don't just establish relationships with just, anybody. It was your passion and the way you worked and the way you went about your business that obviously separated you from a lot of other people. And I recognized that from the jump. So, I was definitely going to be your supporter. I was going to do whatever I had to do, but obviously it all paid off, man. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Cause I mean, like I said, it was a very, I remember the time very vividly because there was other coaches at that time were telling me like total opposite, like you're making the worst decision of your life type thing.
We talked in the underneath the stadium.
Yeah,
it was underneath the stadium. I remember having a conversation with you. Maybe it wasn't that specific conversation, but I remember having a conversation with you outside of the locker room, right around the weight room, and having that conversation with you or having a conversation with you. You know what I mean? And that was but I mean, how long ago was that? But
that was like 8-9 years ago, man.
Yeah. So, like I said, man, it's certain guys that leave an impact and certain guys that, like I said, man, it's, you don't come around, you don't come around guys like you very often.
I appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
Well, before we go any further, I just want to really just kind of send our prayers to actually one of my brothers, like damn near blood brothers. You coached him. Brett is actually in the hospital right now.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And he's been up there in North Carolina for a little bit, and I mean, just doing his thing. I think he wanted, because he was living out there for a while, maybe a few years ago.
Okay.
And I think maybe a few months ago he just wanted to go visit, so he's been up there for a little bit, but he did have just some health, a little health scare, but he's in the hospital right now and he's doing well. He's progressing. His mom went out there, so they're just there with him. But I mean, just wanted to kind of just dedicate for sure this conversation and really just send our prayers and strength to him, because I mean he's close to both of us. Very, I mean, his brother and yeah.
That's Brett is, man, he was another one of my all-time favorite guys. Just a guy that, went about his business, did all the right things, great student athlete, and obviously a guy that I had a great relationship with. And that's, I got to coach his brother in the All-Star game. I was very big on, hey, we got to make sure that we draft this kid. And, I got to, obviously talk to Brett, during that time. So, man. And I, matter of fact, I even made a trip down there to Portales when he was at Eastern, and I got to watch him and Johnny Smith and Tayshawn Gary, and at that time he had committed at that time, so I got to watch them and got to go visit them, man. So, man, that's very unfortunate, man. But I love Brett, man. That's the crazy thing about that. I remember I used to tell you guys, look around this room right now. When you guys were, as seniors, I tell my seniors this all the time. I said, look around this room right now. I said, unfortunately, in the next 5 to 10 years, X amount of you guys are, probably going to be in a situation to where, it was a thing that life threw at you that you weren't expecting. Some of you, unfortunately, may be, dead, locked up, whatever the case may be. And, but it's just a harsh reality, man. And as obviously as we get older, you kind of start to recognize and realize that, life is, it's precious. But that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Man. That's.
Do you remember guys? I mean, I'm sure you remember dudes that came up when you were in high school that you probably would have thought would have been playing on Sundays or just kind of like doing something great, but I'm sure something.
Man, Cliff Tucker.
Yeah.
Clifton Tucker, man. That was I shared a locker right next to that guy. I got to experience and see, Dallas's son, be born and kind of be around for that a little bit early on. And, obviously what happened with him, and, he was such a big part of my high school career, and getting to be around a special player like that. And I tell my guys this all the time, man, it's a guy that, he's a legend, he's definitely a legend. And, but you obviously would have never expected something like that to happen. You know what I mean? So that's the first guy that comes to mind.
For sure.
And I'll never forget, man, getting that phone call and, just kind of being like, what in the world? You know what I mean? It was just like, of all people, that biggest smile on his face, one of the best dudes of all time, great father, you're just way too short, just cut your life way too short.
For sure. That's one dude I'd like. If you're from El Paso, but really if you're from the Northeast, question. All about like Cliff Tucker.
No
I mean,
question.
that was a dude,
Man, a guy, and the best part about him, man, was, on top of him being a dude, he was also the best teammate of all time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just super supportive. He was the first guy that was going to be down there when you scored or when you did something great. He was going to be down there to celebrate with you. Just a supporter of everything that you did. And, like I said, I was blessed to, share a locker right next to him. And, before every game we had a little ritual that we would do. And, so it's things like that, man. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And, so you grew up here in El Paso?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. Grew up in Northeast, went to Canyon Hills and then went on to go to Chapin. I still live in Northeast.
Yeah. So what was your childhood like, would you say? Did you grow up with siblings?
No, you know what? So initially I grew up as a single child. My mom, I had my real dad wasn't very much in the picture. And my mom met a great man, and he ended up being my stepdad, and he's a dude that I consider my father. And, he filled that role, like no other. And, so I was very blessed, man. I didn't skip a beat, when it came to that, so not having a father figure, whatever the case may be. And, I have a ton of uncles that, also played football, were big influence in my life. All my mom's brothers and stuff like that also had played a big part in, raising me and stuff like that. So, I've been blessed, man. I've been blessed my whole life. I have, there is no sob story for me. I can sit there and say that, I've had a lot of great people in my life. To include a great circle of friends, to, my family. So, I've been very blessed. I really have.
For sure. And so you grew up. So what do you envision yourself doing when you were like maybe in high school?
You know what, man? So my dad, the guy who I consider my father, he was a police officer. So that was kind of my vision. I kind of wanted to be a police officer. I kind of wanted to go into, law enforcement. And then when I graduated in 2010, there was a hiring freeze. So I had put my application in for Border Patrol, DEA, FBI, all that good stuff. And, it was a government hiring freeze. So, they were telling me, it could be up to 2 years before, you kind of went through your process. And so in the meantime, I remember calling Coach Walker, another big influence in my life, and, head coach at Franklin. And I said, hey, Coach, you know what? I'd go back every summer. He'd host a camp, and all of us former players, we would go back and we'd work his camp.
So he was your coach at Chapin.
He was my coach at Chapin. Yeah.
And then he was at Franklin at the time.
He was at Franklin.
Okay.
Yeah. So once I graduated, the year I graduated, he coached another year at Chapin, and then that following year, he ends up getting the job at Franklin.
Got you.
And so anytime we got an opportunity to come back in town, we'd go down and visit him, and and I'll never forget, it was one of those summers where he sat me down, and I didn't think I was going to be a coach. It was kind of one of those things that was the last thing on my mind. I didn't want to teach. I didn't want to coach. It was, but he sat me down, after one of those camps, and he said, hey, man, I think you'd make a great coach. And I left that office, just kind of feeling a certain way. Mm-hmm. And that kind of just stayed in my head. And then, when, like I said, I had initial, my intentions were to be, work a government job and do that type of thing. And, I got my degree in, criminal justice, psychology, and, minor in forensic science and all this. And so, before I knew it, I was doing my alternative certification to be a teacher. Mm-hmm. And it all stemmed from Coach Walker.
Wow.
Just kind of giving me those words and saying, hey, man, I think you'd be a great coach. And, I kind of pursued it. And then he was the first person to hire me.
Yeah.
So I got to work at Franklin. I got to be around, my, coaches that I got to play with, or I got to play for at Chapin, that were all at Franklin at that time.
Yeah. So what would you say made Coach Walker like a good coach, great coach?
You know what, man, his presence, his leadership, he had a great staff that, worked under him, and the guys that worked under him were a big part of that. Coach Brown, Coach Coach Mack. Like I said, even some of my former coaches that I played for at Chapin, when I was in high school. And, it was just that opportunity to get back to that, and football and sports were such a big part of my life that, it's essentially shaped me into the person that I am today. And, I was very grateful for that. And so, when I got that opportunity, man, I jumped all over it, know, and so I got to be a part of that Franklin staff and work for those guys. And, and then everything kind of just happened after that, man. I've been doing this for, this is my 15th year now.
Wow.
So, yeah.
It's amazing. And so Coach Brown was under Coach Walker?
Yeah, he was, yep.
At Chapin?
At Chapin, yep.
And Coach Mack?
Yep, Coach
wow,
Mack.
Okay.
So it was probably about 7 coaches from Chapin that went on to Franklin. And so when I got hired at Franklin, I got the opportunity to work for Coach, obviously, to work for Coach Walk, but also work alongside the coaches that I played for.
Got you.
So,
and I played for.
Exactly, that we play for.
Yeah,
right,
exactly. Yeah. That's amazing.
So that was a cool thing.
So it was the ones I played for, Coach Mack.
Coach Warner.
Did Coach Warner coach you?
Coach Warner didn't coach me, but I got to work alongside another one of my best friends. Coach Warner, who's the head coach at Pebble Hills right now. Another one of my best friends, I got to work alongside of him. I mean, the very first staff that I worked on, man, there was 7 head coaches on that staff.
Wow.
Yeah, 7 head coaches on that staff.
That's amazing.
I was blessed, man, like I said, to be around the right people. Obviously, we had the success that we had when we were at Chapin. You know what I mean? So it just, I guess I was spoiled in that sense, you know what I mean? Just kind of be around that, where a lot of guys don't, they don't get to experience a successful season, the success that we had when we were at Chapin. But on top of that, go on to work for your, guys that you look up to and guys that you, essentially end up becoming your mentors. But, like I said, man, I was very blessed. And then now I get to work alongside, my head coach, who was also a teammate for me at Chapin, Coach Martinez, Frank Martinez. Okay. You've met Coach Martinez, and so obviously you've come down and you did your thing over there. But so another one of my teammates. So it's one of those full circle things.
Yeah,
man.
that's amazing.
And essentially that's what it comes down to, man. Just being around the right people, and just being happy doing what you do.
So when you go in like the first season, what exactly is your role, and what's that kind of like dynamic like from switching to a player to a coach?
You know what? It took me a while.
It
took me a while to kind of get the hang of things, because it was kind of that player coach relationship where, I was still very much in my head a player.
Yeah. And your coaches are the people you played for.
Exactly.
And now you have to, like, they're basically you're just not your bros, but like your colleagues.
My colleagues,
yeah.
Exactly. And essentially my body, I was the guy at the bottom of the totem pole.
Yeah.
So it took a little bit of adjusting, just to kind of get, familiar with that. But
you get initiated at all?
Oh man, listen, I got my ass ripped a few times, and definitely went through all that stuff. But like I said, it was all in good love. It was love for sure. Just kind of trying to show me the way, and just trying to point me in the right direction. And so, like I said, man, for me, that's one thing that I've always said is, like, I have no excuse. I've been around just great coaches, great men, not just great coaches, but great men, guys that have great father figures, guys that I know are great fathers, great husbands, that I can just, my mentors, my, role models for me, not just as a player, from player to coach standpoint, but now being a colleague and that type of stuff. So, like I said, man, I was blessed, very fortunate. But yeah, just, lucky.
Yeah.
For sure.
So then you started at, what was your first position as a coach at Franklin?
Man, I was tight ends, and we didn't even run a tight end package. They gave me a tight end coach, but we weren't, we had a small tight end package at the time, but Coach Mack was actually he was a receivers coach, so I got stuck with, they put me with Coach Mack. But the cool thing about that was I just got to learn. You know what I mean? I just got to kind of sit back and learn, and he kind of showed me the way. Offensively, I kind of got my feet wet there.
Because at high school you played offense or defense?
You know what? I was a defensive guy. I was DN. Yeah, I played DN. I played some tight end. I didn't, get the ball thrown at me. I was more of a blocker, but it was it was cool to work alongside Coach Mack, and I got to learn a lot from him. Coach Warner over at Pebble Hills. He was also a guy that he was also one of the receivers coaches. So, I got to learn from him as well, but he was also a teammate of mine. So, like I said, man, it was a great experience. And then obviously I went from being a, receivers coach, tight ends guy to being a running backs coach to eventually going on when I got to Andress,
I remember I think you were running backs.
I was running backs coach. Yeah, I was running backs coach. So I got my own position at that point. So, but I had guys like Johnny Smith and Tayshawn Gary, and those are my first guys. But
if you didn't play that position, how do you go about just kind of learning that position as a coach? It's just like you got to do your homework.
For sure, man. It's just like anything else, man. You got to ask, obviously ask questions, surround yourself with the right people. There's obviously a lot of clinics and different things that kind of, go into all that stuff, but learning all that, but it was definitely a transition, because a lot of times when you become a coach, especially as a young coach, you kind of have that mentality where you want your players to kind of have the same mindset that you had when you were playing. Mm-hmm. But the reality of it is that, everyone's different. Everyone learns different. Everyone has a different passion. Everyone has kind of a different way of going about their business. So that was one thing early on that I had to kind of figure out was, it's everyone has their own, kind of their own rhyme and reason. Mm-hmm. So, I was always one of those things where it was like, man, I'm trying to, save everybody. I want to, be an impact on everybody, that type of thing. But then you kind of start to, figure out that you got special guys like yourself, that you're like, man, this guy's special. You're not going to get through to everybody. That's kind of a hard thing to accept as a coach because, you want to get through to everybody. You want to have that impact, especially knowing the impact that those guys had on us. You want to be that guy for them. But the reality of it is, man, it's not everyone's going to, kind of, have that, kind of grasp that, you know? So it took a little bit of figuring out to do, obviously, over the course of, X amount of years. But,
is there a player that surprised you in your years? Like where he was maybe just like a complete, maybe not even talent wise, he wasn't good, but maybe just a troublemaker, and maybe he wasn't like, he talented, but he didn't work. And then senior year, he was like that guy, Is there anybody that like comes to mind? Maybe not that exact thing, but
what's cool, man, is so, and I won't say his name, but it was very cool this past week. Actually on this past Saturday, I got a text message from a grandma of one of my former players when I was at Andress, and she just sent me pictures of one of our former players graduating from the Navy or from boot camp. Mm-hmm. And I haven't talked to this kid in a long time. And before I left Andress, he was really going through it. Mom and dad were, neither of them were in the picture. Was living with the grandparents, and then grandpa passed away. And so he went through a really hard time. He had and that was the time when I was coaching him. And, I did my best to kind of, he was one of my position guys. And so I did my best to be in his corner. And, half the things you don't even remember talking to these kids about, because obviously you have a lot of conversations and stuff like that. But, he randomly one night while he was at boot camp, just shot me a message and just said like, hey coach, like, I'm just here, in my bunk. I'm thinking about you. I'm thinking about the things that the things that you taught us and the things that, you implemented with us, and, how hard you were on us. And he's like, now I get it. And, he even talked about how, just thinking about it was emotional for him. And then as I, read this, I was like, man, I kind of got emotional about it because, you don't know those lasting words that will have that type of impact, Mm-hmm. And so, but at that time, like I said, he was just kind of headed in the wrong direction. Kind of had some siblings or some family members that were kind of mixed up in the wrong things, and I was kind of worried that he'd end up on that same path, especially being in Northeast, man. You know how that is.
For sure.
But nonetheless, he graduated high school, actually got some offers to play at the next level.
Wow.
And tagged me on all his stuff, and was very excited even after I had left Andrus. And then 5 years afterwards, his grandma texted me this weekend and was like, "Hey, coach, send me pictures of this kid," and was like, "Hey, he's graduated from boot camp and now he's in the Navy, he's doing all this." And so I was like, "Man, how cool."
Yeah.
And then I got an opportunity to talk to him and just hey, congratulate him, and then obviously have that conversation and stuff like that, man. But it's just he was one of those kids. I never knew where he'd end up and how he'd end up. And I mean, now he's doing his thing, and man, he sounded like a talking to him as a 17, 16-year-old kid to now a grown man. And just his mindset and where he was at. And I mean, things like that is what makes you proud, man. So I mean, there's been a handful of kids like that, but he's definitely one of the ones that kind of sticks out to me right now.
Yeah. Would you say playing is as fulfilling as coaching?
You know what? I think playing is fulfilling in the sense of everything that the sport teaches you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like everything that you're able to get out of it. Football, obviously, sports in itself. I was a baseball guy too. Taught me so much. It taught you about adversity. It taught you about, getting through those difficult, tough times that, so, but now coaching it's different, because it's, the impact now that you get to make on, the kids that you coach, obviously. Right. And so a guy like yourself and, and I see you doing your thing, and I see James doing his thing. And it just, man, it's a sense of pride, man. Like I think so in that sense, there's far more pride in as a coach than there ever was as a player. You know what I mean? It's just the pride, I think. For I guess playing the game is more of a personal thing, and kind of what it taught you. But it's more now the sense of pride that you get as a coach, man, seeing you guys do your thing. And there's nothing like getting a invitation in the mail to, a wedding or a graduation, or, from a grandma saying, "Hey, you know what, so-and-so graduated," and, that type of thing, and having those conversations. And then even the baby showers, getting pictures, "Hey, this is my daughter, this is my son." And, then getting to meet them, man, that in itself is more fulfilling than anything else. And I'm be honest with you, that's why I do what I do. I think I figured that out is the relationships. That's really what it comes down to. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Damn. And so, like, do you feel like that can kind of get how do you say it? Like coaches can lose sight of that in the process. Yeah.
No question, man. I mean, coaching. So the way I kind of put it is this. I'm also a teacher. I teach for PE, for Christ's sake. But it's not like I teach it's not like I teach science and math or whatever the case may be. But I tell I think this is the kind of comparison that you can kind of make to that is, every week as a coach, you take a test in front of X amount of fans. Right. Thousands of fans, whatever the case, may be in the city that sit there and watch and will critique you and kind of just, have their own opinions about you. So I think it's figuring out that you got to obviously block that stuff out. You got to, ignore that and just kind of focus on the grand scheme, the big picture of things. Really what it comes down to is, I was obviously I was a head baseball coach as well, but it was one of those things where, like, you're not necessarily trying to produce a Division I athlete. You're trying to produce a Division I human being, right? You're trying to produce a Division I, father, a Division I husband, and that's, when you kind of put that in perspective, where it's not necessarily about the wins and losses, right? It comes down to, like, man, how can we be an impact on this kid's life? Because at the end of the day, at some point, right, sports is going to end. Then you're not going to have sports, forever. But how can sports be, an impact on this kid's life, right? So I think that's kind of what the pride that I now take in what I do. And I can honestly sit there and say that it probably it does definitely stem from, the coaches that I had and the guys that I played for. So it's definitely about perspective, definitely about perspective.
Yeah. Do you have to talk to certain, you feel like you have to talk to certain kids differently?
Man, you know what? It's no question. No question. Just like anybody, right? Like it's kind of finding everybody's niche. It's understanding how to communicate. And I think that's what comes down to being a good leader, right? Is, understanding, how can I get through to this kid? There's certain kids that, I can scream at and I can yell at and I can get in their butt and challenge them, and they're going to respond this way. And then there's certain kids that, I got to just go put my arm around them, and just talk to them, just, hey, this is what it is. And, and everyone learns different, and that's one thing is, like I said, I was very much the type of player that, if you challenge me or if you call me out, it was on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I loved an ass chewing. I loved getting my ass wrung, and I love, someone telling me I wasn't good enough and I wasn't this and that and cuss me out because it's going to light a fire in me. Whereas not everyone responds that way, and it's just like anything else, when you're in any type of business or any type of, work environment, it's figuring out, like, how can I get the most out of this, this person, right? And if I can get the most out of this person by, simply having a conversation with them and pulling them aside and saying, because some kids don't respond well to the ass chewing, right? There's one kid on my team right now that he doesn't respond well to that, so I've figured that out, and it's been through trial and error. We've had our instances where, our times on the field where, we clash or whatever the case may be. But, I've figured out that, hey, this kid needs to be directed, and talked to this way. And so I'll bring him aside and I'll talk to him this way and I'll address him this way. And I think, at the end of the day, it's a respect thing, and it's one of those things that it's conforming, right, to all the different types of personalities. And, you got to remember too, man, like, everyone has a different, everyone's raised differently.
Yeah.
Everyone has a different home life. Everyone has, not, especially being in Northeast, when I was at Andrus, man, it's, not everybody, comes from a, two person or two parent, household.
Yeah.
And not everybody has, the support system and all that type of stuff. So it's how can I get through this kid? Maybe this kid's been ripped. He gets home and he gets his ass ripped for whatever reason. It's he doesn't need that at practice.
Yeah.
And he's not going to respond to that. So what am I going to do to get through to him? And so it's and nowadays that's for me it's fun for me to kind of try to figure that out. Is like, man, hey, today I wasn't able to get through to this kid because he just didn't respond to the way I my message and how I kind of directed him. So tomorrow, what can I do that's going to get the most out of him? Because at the end of the day, that's our job, right?
Yeah.
We got to get the most out of these kids. And these kids don't know any better, right? And we're the adults, and we got to figure out how to, kind of, lead them and point them in the right direction and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's, I'm still going to hold them accountable. I'm still going to be hard in that sense. And, because if I'm not holding them accountable and if I'm not being hard on them, tough love type of thing, then, I'm doing them an injustice, so it's definitely, and that's kind of one of those things where I've had, I'm sure you play for Coach Lewis and you play for Coach Forbes and it's tough love, and those guys have nothing but love for you, but they're going to be hard on you.
For sure.
And you knew where that message was coming from and now I promise you as an adult, there's times where I hear my coach's voice in my head, you know what I mean? I'm just like, man, don't quit or don't be this or don't be that. And
for sure.
And you're going to get through it, so. But yeah, that's kind of the the pride that I take in trying to find different ways to get through to kids. Yeah.
And when it comes to like success actually on the field, how much of it has to do with the relationship between coaches and just that cohesiveness and chemistry?
It's everything.
Yeah.
It's like a family, right? It's like a family.
Because as a player, it's like you obviously sometimes you see like coaches. Sometimes you see it, but you don't really notice. But I feel like there's a whole dynamic that you don't realize as a player between coaches.
For sure,
Yeah.
Especially male coaches. Man.
Yeah.
There's a lot of testosterone, flowing around in that room. So there's a lot of pride. There's a lot of egos. But when you're around a good staff and you're around a good head coach, good leader, he's going to be the one that kind of forms that family type of culture, where, you know what, hey, we're not always going to get along.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? There's going to be times where we disagree, just like any, you know, just like being a part of any family, or, you know, but we're going to respect each other. And we're going to have conversations like men. You know, we're going to talk behind closed doors. We're never going to disrespect each other in front of, you know, in front of our kids and that type of thing. You know, just like parents are never going to argue in front of their kids. You know, that, you know, so that things are done, you know, professionally, you know, behind closed doors and that type of thing. And, but at the end of the day, man, it just comes down to like, hey, we all got to have the same mindset, same purpose. You know, we're here for the kids. Right. If you're here for the kids, then, you know, if we all have that same mindset and that same mentality, then, you know what, then it should all kind of fall in place. And the guys that are not, and kind of the guys that are about ego and the guys that are about themselves and, you know, whatever the case may be, then, you know, those guys get, you know, weeded out just like anything else. So, yeah, no, man, for sure. There's definitely there's definitely a lot of ego. There's definitely a lot of pride. There's definitely a lot of testosterone in any, you know, locker room or, you know, but, you know, I think like I said, when you have that right leader, and I've had a ton of great leaders. I really have. I've been blessed, man. I worked, like I said, I worked for Coach, worked and played for Coach Walk, who's probably has the one of the biggest, coaching trees in El Paso, and you know, probably the most head coaches currently in El Paso that have worked under him. Mm-hmm. You know, coordinators and all that type of stuff. And so, and then, you know, I got to work for Coach Brown at Andress, and then, you know, work alongside guys like Coach Mack and Coach Horner, Coach Warner over at Chapin. And now I get to work for, you know, one of my best friends, Coach Martinez. You know, we all went to high school together. Yeah. So, you know, and that's one of the things that, you know, you talk about, and it's, you know, you're the average of the 5 people that you hang out with most. Mm-hmm. And, you know, my group of, you know, my true group of friends, man, are all dudes. Yeah. You know, all head coaches, you know, all coordinators, and kind of we all share the same interests, and we all kind of push each other in the right way. And so, yeah, man, it's just been, like I said, I've been very blessed to have been around those situations. And I think a lot of coaches, you know, now don't always get put in that situation. You know, they'll end up in a bad situation where it's not a very good program, mm-hmm. maybe not a very good head coach, and then, you know, it's all the ups and downs that kind of comes with it that kind of maybe discourage you from, you know, kind of wanting to pursue it, because nowadays it's tough, you know, because nowadays it's, you know, you're dealing with, man, it's you know, now you got the, you know, it's the, you know, a lot of egos, I guess you can say, sure. You know, and it's definitely a lot of, you know, there's a lot of factors, I guess, that you can kind of.
I think it's just different the way you can actually coach them too. Like,
for sure.
Obviously, you probably got coached way harder, not necessarily harder, but just differently. Maybe it was like more physical for you guys. Maybe it was just like, maybe it was a little bit more tough love, you know.
You know what? Yeah. And this is what I tell people, man. It's back then, and by no means I condone bullying. Yeah. But back then, you know, you used to get called out for stuff, and you used to kind of be, you know, get made fun of for stuff and this and that, and you know, that kind of just built character. And on top of that, like you said, it was a tough love. You know, it was that extra stuff that, you know, kind of lit a fire in your ass. You know, and just he's like, man, I'm not gonna take this. You know, nowadays it's a little different. You know, it's definitely a little different. Nowadays it's more, these kids want to know why, right? They want to know why. And if you can't explain to them in detail why, and kind of give them those steps, you know what I mean, kind of lead them in the right direction, then you're going to get some pushback, you know? So you better be on top, you know, you better be on top of your stuff. You know, you better have, you know, you better have an answer, you know, especially if you want to get through these type of kids. But I respect that, man. I love kids asking questions like, "Hey, coach, why are we doing this?" Blah blah. And you know, question. Obviously, there's a way to go about it, right? Just like, and that's one thing we tell our kids, like, "Hey, I love the fact that you're going to question me, but there's a way to go about it, right? Let's have a conversation. Let's you know what? If you don't understand something, or if there's something that's bothering you or something that's weighing on you, let's have a conversation about it, rather than having to go through all this extra stuff with, you know, parents getting involved and this and stuff. Well, we could have just had this conversation. We could have figured it out from you know, from the jump, you know. And
do parents get involved a lot in your job?
No question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the hardest part about dealing with that?
You know what, man? It's you know, I can't speak on behalf of a parent because I'm not a parent. You know what? But I've been around kids long enough to understand that, you know what, a kid is a parent's pride and joy. You know what? And that's, that's somebody that, obviously, hey man, they don't want to see upset. They don't want to see, kind of discouraged or whatever the case may be. So they're going to do everything in their power, and rightfully so. But there's a way to go about it. Not, it used to be to where, hey, you have an issue with your coach, go have that conversation with your coach, right? You go figure out why you're not playing. You go do this, and then it's once you figure it out, and once you have that conversation, now what are you going to do about it? Whereas now it's kind of reversed. Now it's kind of those things where, you have conversations with parents, and, they're not asking necessarily, what can my son do better? It's like, why is my son not playing? Why is it, and it's like demanding that type of thing. And, it is different, so, and I think it's obviously the generation, it's one of those things where, when we were young, used to hear the old heads talk about back in my day, right? Back in my day, this is how it was. And now, now me being, where I'm at, I'm like, well, back in my day. And then now you being where you're at, you're like, well, back in my day. So, it's just one of those things where like, I don't know if it gets softer or what, but it's almost like that's kind of how it plays out, you know? And you just got to conform. That's just like anything else, man. If you don't conform, then you die. You die as a coach. You die in that profession. You got to conform, and that's just with anything. And if you're not willing to do it, and if you're stuck in your ways, and you're stubborn and all that type of stuff, then like I said, you're not being a leader. You're not doing any. You're not doing anybody any justice. So. But yeah, man, it's a different day and age, no question.
Yeah, like you can't necessarily blame it for being softer. Like I'm just speaking in general. Like I guess maybe your generation or even my generation, not my generation yet, because I feel like we're not, a lot of my generation aren't parents yet, but let's just say your generation, like the ones who are kind of saying it's soft are like, that's a generation of kids they raised in a way.
Right.
Maybe a little bit older, but it's like we can't necessarily complain if like this is necessarily like this is your generation.
That's a generation raising that generation.
Yeah,
exactly. No question. And you're right. And now it's like you said, it's it's how it all evolves. And it's just like it's our my generation now that have these kids, because now it's that thing where some of my friends are now, their kids are in high school and that type of stuff, and I can appreciate especially like former teammates and guys that I grew up with that kind of had the same upbringing that we had, and kind of the way we went about our business. They kind of implement that in their kids, right? But now it's these kids that are, just graduated a few, not too long ago, where I'm like, man, those kids are pretty soft. Well, those soft kids are now raising, what I mean? So it's a revolving door, man. But it's not going to get any easier. And in the world of sports now, you got all these NIL stuff, and you got all these, the ability to transfer to any school now, and it's a magnet here, magnet there, and so it's not like it used to be, to where hey, you were zoned to your school, and this is where you're going, and this is what it's going to be, and these guys are going to play for. Now it's like, man, parents are shopping their kids around, and hey, what's going to be the best fit for my kids? And and I'm gonna be honest with you, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, is it's almost like you're doing these guys an injustice. You're not teaching them how to go win a spot. Go compete. Go, if you're not good enough, then why are you not good enough? What are you going to do to be better, right? And so now it's like, okay, hey, you didn't get a starting position, or you're not, whatever the case is, and now I'm going to move you to a different school. And I get it. Everybody has, their reasons, and sometimes it's, no question, it is for the best, but at times it's like, man, let that, let them go through a little adversity, let's see how it all plays out, and, if he takes that high road, then there's probably a good chance that, he probably ends up as starter, or at least he's being competitive enough to, and I promise you, he's going to learn a far greater lesson in that than, just having the easy road to just go transfer somewhere. And like I said, man, I don't knock parents and their decisions sometimes, and I get it, for some, in some instances it is for the best. But man, sometimes it's one of those things where, man, hey, let them grind it out. Let them figure it out, and they're going to be better for it at the end of the day. And
also you probably get some positives too, whether like maybe they might be a little bit harder to get through, or maybe they're a little bit softer per se. But maybe they also, like, from my experience when I went to, like, Eldo, when me and James went to Eldo, man, like we were very first of all, we were nervous as shit. Like that was our first time. Like obviously we've talked a little bit, but that was our first like public speaking really event or gig that we've ever done. And I was super nervous. I definitely had to kind of go over what I was going to say and just kind of the story I wanted to tell, but I was just very not surprised, but I was very impressed by like they were just like they just were locked in, super respectful. And I don't know, is that how they are all the time, like cuz I felt like that was amazing, and like I felt like when I'm thinking back to like my teammates, I don't know if like they would have sat through something like that. Like maybe, but I don't know, maybe I'm just like it just seemed like they were different in that way.
You know what I think it was, man, is they recognize real. You know what I'm saying? They recognize the message. They recognize you guys as it being a real thing. You weren't just coming to just blow smoke up their ass. And, I think they definitely saw for what it was. And, like I told you, is like, sometimes I talk about my experiences and this is that. I'm telling these kids about this and that. And they're like, man, you're an old head. Shut the hell up. Like, you don't, you know what I mean? Like, you ain't in our, you're damn near 40, man. Just, shut the hell up. You don't know what we're talking about. But when you have a kid or a grown ass man now, right, that comes and talks to our kids, but, is closer to their age, and you talk about your experiences and you're as real as you were and you poured your heart out the way you did. It's like, man, you take a step back and you're like, holy shit, these kids they realize like, man, I'm going through similar things, and I'm feeling these experiences. And, one of our players, he took a big, he really did take a lot of what you said. And looking back at that video, matter of fact, today I went back and looked at that video and I was looking and I saw him specifically just like locked in on you, man.
Yeah.
And this is one of the best players in the city, but
in the state now.
In the state, yeah. And he was just so fixated on this. And, you definitely, you made mention of, obviously, the anxiety part of it and, kind of just the hardships that, kind of that you experienced. And man, these kids are experiencing this, man, every day, and when you can relate to that, and when you see a guy that like, man, he played sports, he did this, he did that, and now he's successful. And obviously now he's finding his way and he's doing his thing. Like, man, you're going to listen, right? Because you're like, man, he's not stuck in that hole that I, may have felt that I was stuck in, and it's you guys, you have no idea, man, that was such a huge thing that you guys did. And, how vulnerable, right, that you guys were. And, and this kid, he wears an anxiety bracelet, and it's one of those things where, he's got so much pressure and he's got so many different things that he has to deal with. And, he's got a lot of pressure on him, man, a lot of eyes on him. And man, it's just like, I could never fathom that because I was never that dude. I'd never had, that amount of eyes on me, that amount of, people talking about you and pressure and this and that. It's like, this is real, and so now getting to hear it from a guy like you and a guy that's obviously successful, played at the next level and, did your thing at the high school level and stuff like that, man, it really sinks in with them, and it's something that they can relate to. And so, man, that was a huge thing for those guys, man. It really was. It definitely was.
Yeah, we'll never forget that experience. It was amazing, and just to have that. I mean, the thing is, like, even though we're like 6 years removed, 6-7 years removed, I still feel like that kid. It's all those emotions, all those feelings, just feel like I experienced them like yesterday.
Yeah.
So, I think. It was just really cool to see how, and they're just talented as hell, dude. Like and then when they come work out with us at Top View, I'm just like, dude, these kids are different, man.
Yeah, no, it is, man. It's a different, it's a different type of kid, but at the end of the day, they're kids. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's one thing that I gotta constantly remind myself is like, you know what? And I've worked at different places. I've worked on the West Side. I've been at Franklin, right? You got West Side kids. Obviously, I've been in Northeast. I've been in, at Andress, and then I've been on the East Side now. At El Dorado.
And you can tell a difference.
No question.
Yeah.
There's the side of town obviously plays a factor, but at the end of the day, kids are kids.
Yeah.
Kids. kids are gonna get away, or are gonna try to get away with anything that you're gonna allow them to get away with. Kids are gonna, take in whatever, especially when it's if you're being real about it, you have a true purpose behind it, man. They're gonna sit there and they're gonna take that in, and like I said, man, they're gonna recognize the BS. They're gonna, that's one thing about kids, man. If you ain't about your shit, and if you ain't, that's a kind of the tough thing about being a coach, man, is they're gonna see right through it. You know what I mean? You got to bring your A game every single day. No matter, despite how you're feeling. And me being a coordinator and me being, a leader of our offense, man. It's sometimes you're not feeling the necessarily the best that you possibly be right then and there, but kids are going to recognize that. So
sure.
it's kind of, you got to put on that, you definitely got to, put it out there for these kids. They're going to recognize it. Recognize real.
Have you ever had to check yourself? Be like, oh, it's not like I'm kind of low energy. I'm
absolutely,
not feeling it today, man. Come on,
absolutely,
man.
Yeah. Absolutely. And there's been times where, I've gone through a practice and I was upset about how bad our energy was and how bad we were and how we weren't very good. And I'll take a step back and I'm like, how the hell were you? Like, what did you bring to the table today? Like, were you, fiery? Were you contagious in what you were bringing, what you were expecting from your players? And that's one thing where I got to take a step back and I got to, obviously evaluate myself as a coach. And, obviously it's not easy to do every single day, especially throughout a 3-month season, 10 game season. And not to mention, the off season, this and that. I mean, it's tough to bring it every single day, man. But, for the sake of these kids, you got to, you got to flip that mindset, because otherwise they're going to see right through it.
For sure.
Yeah, they're going to see right through it.
Yeah. Is there like not to bring up like just like bad moments like that, but in your like coaching career, there's thousands of plays you've ran and gone through, but is there one where it sticks out where like you made a mistake and it was like it cost you like pretty hard?
Man, I've made a lot of mistakes. I've made a lot of mistakes, and that's the beautiful thing about trial and error. Is, no question. I think, I was I was a head baseball coach. I went from being a head baseball coach, so that was kind of my focus for 6 years, and I was kind of just locked in on that. Obviously, I was still coaching football, and I took a ton of pride in that, and I love what I did. But I was on the defensive side of the ball, and when Coach Martinez, Frank, he hired me. Initially, he hired me as a defensive coordinator because I was on defense for 9 years, and we're gung ho and I was ready to go. And then he kind of hit me with the whole, hey, we got another great I was able to hire a DC who had a ton of experience and was rightfully so the man for the job. And he's like, hey, I need you to be the OC. And it was, man, we were weeks away from, the start of the season, and we were kind of just getting rolling, but I had to figure it out. And, throughout that process of trying to figure it out, man, it was a ton of mistakes that I made.
And this was what, three years ago?
3 years ago.
Yeah.
This is my 4th year. So, there was a ton of mistakes that I made, and it was a constant thing where, man, you're just kind of, you're going to throw shit against the wall and you're going to see what sticks. And it was one of, not so much that you didn't put the work or you didn't try to, but there's that you just didn't know, and it's just, experience is everything, without experience, like, what are you?
Yeah.
So,
especially as an OC, like you can literally, you're responsible, like, you can call whatever, like you can run whatever formation you want. You can do it.
And the one thing about that is, I got told, I've been told by, some of my mentors is it doesn't matter what kind of scheme it doesn't matter what it doesn't matter what, shit don't matter. It's, do you have the Jimmies and the Joes? Do you, because at the end of the day, those kids got to go out and execute, and, not only is it having the Jimmies and the Joes, but it's like, first and foremost, like, you got to get those guys to buy in. You got to get those guys to believe in what you're doing so that when you are teaching, they're going to embrace it. They're going to go out and execute. Right. So, and early on, like, man, I was so like up and down and I didn't have a whole lot of confidence in what I was doing. And I was lost, and it was easy for those kids not to have that belief in me, and I got that and I understood that, which now it just motivated me. It just drove me to sit there and say like, man, I'm going to figure this damn thing out, you know? And so it's just spending countless hours and time with, you know, going and talking to the right people and going to the right, you know, talking to, you know, going to clinics. And like I said, just being in a circle, you know, of some of my best friends that are great coaches.
You pick their brains a lot.
Oh my God, man. Absolutely. There's times where I mean, I'm not bullshitting you, man. I was calling dudes. I'd call 5 guys on my way home.
Wow.
You know, I had 5 conversations I would have, and I would just call dudes and be like, hey, you know, I'm calling Ryan Warner, I'm calling Coach Mack, I'm calling these guys. I'm like, hey, man, like, what, you know, I got to quit. Like, what do I do here? You know, because I'm so damn lost. And last year, you know, we were 1-9.
Yeah.
You know, we went through a 1-9 season, and that was brutal. That was as brutal of a season for me that I've ever experienced. You know, like I said, I've been blessed. I've been fortunate. I've been, you know, I guess you can call me spoiled in the sense that I've never really been a part of a losing season, even having played in high school.
Yeah.
You know, we made it to the 3rd round as a senior and this and that. So like I said, it was just one of those things where I just wasn't used to it, you know, and I just had to kind of figure out and kind of get through that whole, you know, man, it was miserable. It was miserable. But now, you know, we're here, we're sitting at 7-0, and you know, we went from a 1-9 season just a year ago to 7-0, and it really just comes down to the process, man. It's amazing. It's the work that, you know, with the same exact kids. You know, we got the same exact group of kids. You know, but like I said, what it comes down to is experience. You got to go through it. You got to go through it, man. You got to go through the ringer in order to grow, in order to be better from it. So. You know, now hindsight looking back, I mean, maybe it was a blessing, you know, because now we're on path to, you know, it's obviously been a special season so far, and obviously we're trying to keep it going, but, you know, you got to go through it.
Yeah. And just because I'm so curious, like, about this, like, just the detail of it, what makes it, you say you're lost, like, what makes it lost, or what makes you feel that? Is it just what you're calling, is it working, or is it seeing certain defenses? Is it like maybe you're not getting what you thought out of a player that you're not sure if they're in the right position? Like, what was kind of going into that confusion, you know?
You know what? It's that I mean, it's figuring out. I mean, it's the preparation, obviously, right? It's the preparation is,
because football's chess at the end of the day. It
really is chess.
I didn't realize, you know, and you know who's really made me realize is Gabe, my little cousin, just because I feel like his mind, even though he's so young, he just, when you watch a game with him, and him and his family and his dad are huge football guys, like, they live and breathe the sport, and when you watch it with them, like, they will break down what's going on. So, and
Gabe was Gabe's a dude, man. The way he saw the game was special. But it definitely comes down to it's the preparation. It's the, there's so much, you know, preparation. That's why, you know, football is one of those sports where you only get to play it once a week.
Yeah.
You know, like unlike any other sport where you get to play 2, 3, 4, 5 games a week sometimes, right?
Yeah. A day sometimes.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. And football is one of those things, man. It's a one time a week, man. So you don't, and like we tell our guys, man, we do everything that we do off season wise, summer wise, all this stuff for 10 weeks that we're guaranteed. That's it. 10 games. You know, there's guys, like you said, they'll play 10 games in 2 days.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, it's the amount of preparation that goes into football, you know, specifically, but you know, it's obviously the trial and error. It's watching film. But at the end of the day, it's understanding your players. It's understanding that, you know what, hey, this kid can do this. This kid can't do this. So I'm not going to put this kid that can't do this in this situation. And then it's putting this kid in this situation to where, hey, he's pretty good at this, so we're going to put him in this, you know. So there's a lot of managing. There's a lot of moving parts. But at the end of the day, it's about having the right staff, you know, and having the right guys in your corner that, you know, guys that you can trust. And I'm very blessed, you know, where I have great, you know, assistant coaches. Here's the deal, man. You're only as good as the people around you. Yeah, that's really what it comes down to. You're only as good as the people around you. And I'm very blessed to be around a very good staff and guys that work their tails off to, you know, we all have the same, you know, vision, the same goals that, you know, we've busted our tails, you know, in trying to put kids in the right situations. You know, and then essentially, you know, coaching them up so that they learn their way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's like conforming. Like I said, it's not every kid's going to learn this way. So I can literally, we have an offensive line. I can rip this kid and I can just go in his ass. And I do it because I know it's what's going to get him going. And then there's another kid where I literally have to go and I pull him aside. I just put my arm around him and I say, "Hey, we good?" And what are we seeing right now? What are we feeling? Okay, well, coach, all right. And so you have a good night, or you having a bad day? Yeah, coach, I'm, whatever the case is. And now it's like weighing out all these other external factors, man.
Yeah,
right? Like you got a kid that, just broke up with his girlfriend, and a kid that has shit going on at home and doesn't have the best situation at home, right? Mom and dad and this and that. And I've had multiple kids in the middle of a field, man, in the middle of a practice, will sit there and cry, man, because like, "Hey, you good?" Like, and they'll just break down and they're like, "I'm not good, man." Like, I've got all this. So you expect them to learn and do all this stuff, man, when they have so much other shit going on. And, it's like understanding, right? Being human and being like, "Hey, fuck, man, it's, it's football. Essentially, football, at the end of the day, football's a game, right?" And it's like, this kid's actually living this life.
Yeah.
And so, but it's also putting in that kid's, in his mind that allow football to be that escape, right?
Yeah.
Allow this beautiful sport, basketball, football, baseball, whatever the case is, to be your escape from the bullshit that you're dealing with right now, right?
Yeah.
So it's just, there's just so many moving parts, man, and you really gotta, it's just like anything else in life, just kind of just dealing with people, man. It's every day, it's a people business,
I wish people like just ordinary people who never been around football can just go and like just experience what it is like leading up to a Friday night game, because like it's so detailed. Like,
man,
you got pictures of players on the board of the opposite team. Like you're going over like what these dudes shit. Sometimes you just get into their personal lives a little bit.
No
man.
question.
Like just you take it to the next level when it comes to preparation. And then like what's kind of like your favorite part about like game day and just that whole feel? Because Friday Night Lights is a unique feeling.
Yeah.
So kind of take me through like your ideal day of like a Friday, from when you first wake up all the way till like the end of a game and you're on your way home. Like, what's that day for you look like, if it's like it just goes how you want it,
Yeah.
and what it feels like?
Like I said, man, there's 10 games that you get throughout the course of a season. And, as I've gotten older as a coach, it's now, appreciating those 10 games week by week. So obviously it depends on the game, whatever the case is, but obviously the night before is obviously, a tough night to kind of get through, especially because you have a lot of emotions and everything else that you're thinking about. And
so you have your walkthrough, and then are you up pretty late, like still game planning?
Yeah, you know what? So like my typical thing is like, I'm going to get my play card ready on Thursday, Wednesday, Thursdays, kind of when I start working on it and kind of started, kind of putting it all together. And then I'm, the night before kind of just making sure that as I'm putting my card together that, these, formations versus this type of defense, I'm good here. You know what? Like, we are going to be in a situation because
so you have to go over scenarios. Like,
oh
if this
my
happened,
God,
this
absolutely.
happened.
And that's what we do throughout practice. So like I'll put together throughout, from Monday through, Thursday, it's different scenarios, situations. I mean, I have a whole checklist of different things that I know I got to cover throughout the course of the week. We talk about 2-minute situations, 4-minute situations. We talk about, overtime situations. We talk about, tempo, all this stuff that we got to incorporate, third and long, whatever. Different personnel packages, all this stuff that we got to kind of consider and put together that are going to make us successful. And as a coordinator, you got to be able to react on the, you got 20 seconds from the time that play ends to the, get that play out. And you better know what that situation is, and you better have prepared for it throughout the course of the week in order to be successful on Friday nights. And that's what took me a long time to get good at was, it was my preparation. I was kind of all over the place, and it just I had to kind of just really narrow it down and put myself in, a third and long, a first, what's my best first down call? What's my best, second and medium, second and, long? What's my best third and short? Whatever. We get into the red zone. I'm on this part. I'm backed up, on this part of the field. Then I get to the middle of the field. Then I get to the, high red zone, low red zone, goal line. What am I going to call? And different factors and situations. And not to mention, I'm going to get this look backed up. I'm going to get this look in the middle of the field. I'm going to get this look in the red zone. And so what are our best plays and what do we do, and to put us in the best situation, right, to be successful? So, and then it's understanding your players, like who are the guys that I'm going to put the ball who am I going to put the ball in their hands? It's understanding that, and that's one thing that took me a while to understand is designating different things to put, make our guys, successful. And then understanding your personnel, your players and stuff like that, man. So, like I said, man, a lot of trial and error, but, I think this year, we've kind of gotten a better grasp on things. And like I said, man, just being around the right, coaches and like I said, having the Jimmies and Joes.
Yeah.
I have a great group of kids on offense right now, man. And those guys are balling. But yeah, it's putting together our my play card throughout the week, Friday morning, kind of waking up and
what time you wake up at?
Oh man, shit, we have practice every day at we have practice at we start at 6:15 every day. I'm usually up about anywhere from 3 a.m. to between 3 and 4 a.m. If I got if I haven't like watched practice film or if I haven't done something getting into that practice, I'll wake up a little bit earlier, but usually by 4. I'll wake up and I'll kind of finalize a practice plan for that day. Watch some film from practice the day before, that type of stuff, kind of make sure that, going into that day, if we're working this situation, okay, hey, the plays that we have in place are exactly what we want, because on Friday night, our kids will know, hey, this is our third down. This is our best third down play. These are our best third down plays. These are our best first down plays. This is our best red zone play. This is what we're gonna run. This is a 2-point. This is gonna be our 2-point play.
Will you get there on Friday and the other team switches up like everything they do?
Yeah. And that's that chess part they just talk about. And that's that like, holy shit. Okay, we're getting this.
Yeah.
And then it's being able to adjust. But if you prepared throughout the week, then it just makes those adjustments, that much easier. So whereas if you haven't done shit, then you're just like, man, you're not prepared for those situations. So literally throughout the course of the week, it's putting your guys in those situations to be successful. You know what I mean? And then the most important thing is your players understanding like, hey, this is what we're going to run in this situation. This is what we're going to do in this situation. So, that's obviously that's taking time. It's taking some time to kind of figure all that out. Like I said, as a coordinator, I was just, like I said, I played a lot of Madden and I did this. And you watch college football and you watch like, man, I want to run this, I want to run that. Like, you can't. You got to understand. Okay, hey, I got kids that can do that, and I got kids that can't do that, right? And so it's figuring out what you get. How you can get the most out of these guys. But it's a ton of preparation, man. And then throughout the course of the day, you obviously you have your routine, and
obviously you have class and everything.
Yeah, you have class and that type of stuff, and then kids come out at a certain time, and then it's feeding them and all the pregame shit that you got to do.
Do y'all go out to? Do y'all go have pregame meal or what?
You know what, we have so our our parents, our booster club parents will provide a meal right before the game. So yeah, we'll have like Paso and stuff like that. Kids will get all that good stuff, man. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, man.
Do you have a ritual before the game or not really?
I have the same playlist, man. No bullshit, since I was in high school.
Wow.
That I listen to. Yeah, the same. There's one, there's everything from the time when I get on the bus and I play that playlist to the time from the time that I get off the bus to the time when I walk on the field, and I kind of go through my routine. I walk the field, do some stuff, and I have to listen to this song before I stop doing whatever it is I do. So yeah, I'm very much about routine. Yeah.
One thing I remember is for us, we would always listen to In the Air.
In the Air.
Where did that start? Because I think that was before I even got there.
Yeah.
Was that a thing just at Andres?
No, that's been a thing, man, since I played.
Wow.
Yeah, no, that was a song that before every game when I was in high school, from the time I was a freshman to the time that obviously I graduated, and then we took that with us. We were at Franklin.
Was it your specific staff, or is that like a football thing? Or
you know what, Coach Brown actually. Coach Brown was the one that he's the one that kind of brought that up, and so and to this day we all we sometimes got together not too long ago. We got together with a group of former players, high school teammates and that type of thing, and on the jukebox I just played In the Air Tonight.
Yeah. And
then just looking at everybody's face, what I mean, like holy shit, and everyone's the hair on everybody's arm stands up, and
I vividly remember those pre-games, man, like pitch black, dark as hell. You just blasting that song, and man, one thing about Coach Brown is like, I've had some motivating ass coaches, but I don't think I've heard anybody talk like him.
No.
Holy shit, dude! Like, it was. I remember vividly. We were because I traveled my freshman year with you guys too.
Oh yeah.
And his speech, like, dude, it still gives me like I don't know exactly remember what he said, but man, he had a way with just being
No
able to
question.
talk to players and just
No
fire you
question.
up.
Yeah.
Is that how you like remember him as well? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh man, like I said, there was times in college, man, where I would, I'd hear, my former high school coach's voices in my head.
yeah,
Don't be a bitch, or don't be this, or don't do whatever the case was, right? And so, absolutely, man.
yeah,
Yeah, and those are, guys that we model ourselves after, and
mm-hmm.
kind of, hope to emulate a little bit. But, yeah, no, he definitely had a way about getting his. And then you had a guy like I said, like Coach Mack, who was polar opposite, very quiet, but kind of just give you that look and just say the few, the not
Yeah.
didn't have a lot to say, but you got it,
Yeah,
and it
for
was just
sure.
one of those things. So it was definitely, like I said, what it came down to is the guys that you
Yeah.
respected and guys that you understood where they were coming from. But yeah, for sure,
Sure.
man.
And even Coach Horner always like
Yeah.
crack. Even though he was scary, he was like tough as hell. But like the shit he would say on the field was probably the funniest shit I've ever
Man.
heard, man.
That's I can't tell you how many classic Coach Horner lines there are, and it's funny, man, because I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know, kind of going back to what we were saying is, everybody's different, like everyone's learning styles is, Coach Brown was very much that dude that had an imprint in the way he kind of went about and what he said, right? Coach Mack, the same thing was, but the one guy, man, like I said, Coach Horner, what was special about him was guys played hard as shit for him. Guys
Yeah.
just ran through the wall, man. And, but what it stemmed from was just him being him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you could appreciate as a player, like, man, this guy is who he is. And you know what? Like you just respected that,
Yeah.
and he would say some outlandish stuff. But it was always, there was always rhyme and reason behind it. And then you maybe, 10 years down the road, you're like, oh shit, that's what he meant, but
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? But it was that thing where, he might be one of the best coaches I've ever been around in the sense of just the way he had the ability that he had, that kids played for him, and he didn't have to be that hard ass. He didn't have to be that, but very technical, very sound, and guys is bald, man.
And I remember like cause he ran the D line.
Yeah, he was a dude.
And dude, like they just as a unit, like D line, when I remember he was coaching them, it was just like they were just so locked in with each other.
Yeah.
Even just and he loved those guys too. You can tell he loved
created
them,
that,
like,
man.
and he even though he was hard as shit on them, but like man, when it came down, I feel like he would do anything for those guys too, and like it was just I remember when he was coaching the D line, it just felt like they were just a unit.
For sure.
Like
For sure. Yeah, no, he had, like I said, that's the cool thing too, is seeing everybody's coaching styles. Just like in life, right? Like you just, your old man's going to tell you something, right? That's going to resonate with you, one way. And then you'll have, maybe someone like myself where, that will tell you something that will resonate with you. And then you'll have somebody that, one of your boys that will, so it's just, it's the message and how that specific person can kind of convey it to you and kind of get through to you, man, that is what essentially makes that person special.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And that's one thing about Coach Horner, man. He had that ability to do that. Yeah. And same thing with Coach Mack.
Yeah. Do you feel like every great coach can be a head coach?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's, I think if you're, if you're in the people business and you're doing this for the right reasons, and like I said, it's about relationships and you don't lose focus on that. A lot of times coaches get caught up in this, like, championship mentality, championship this, championship that, and, it's championship or nothing, and this is that. And I love the mindset and the mentality in that, don't get me wrong, but really it's like, I'm trying to build championship husbands. I'm trying to build championship individuals. I'm trying to build and that, I'm gonna be honest with you, man, when I was a head baseball coach, I think I got caught up in that. I very much got caught up in that. I'm very much trying to fulfill my ego, right? I'm trying to be have these, X amount of, games won and, championships and this, and worried about my own reputation. And you're right, because when you're young, you're trying to still, build a name for yourself, earn that respect amongst your peers.
If people attach like the wins and losses to you as the coach,
Right. Exactly. And it was one of those things where I had to, it took me a couple years to like finally sit back and like, man, it's far more than that. Like it really is, man. Like if we're in this business for why we say we're in this business, then it's about these kids, man. And like I said, how many kids are going to go on and play college, right? There's not very many kids that are going to go on and play college ball. So, and the kids that do, I mean, hopefully, what we're able to teach them and they can obviously go and implement in college, but man, there's going to be far more kids that are going to go off and just be, people, and just go about their lives and be, work, normal jobs or work, whatever the case is. And that's what you got. Those are the guys that you got to focus on, and you can't lose sight of that, man. And like I said, I think once I got that in my mentality was, what's your purpose, right? What's your why? And just like anything else, not just in football, man. Like you got to have a purpose, you got to have a why, and when you're able to put that in perspective, I think that it kind of shapes, everything else. It definitely does.
For sure. And so for you personally, what's kind of been the hardest thing you've had to overcome mentally?
As far as what?
Just in general, whether it's your mental health, maybe it's a situation in your personal life, necessarily football, that just kind of was a setback, but that you were able to kind of, learn a lot from and get past,
I mean, man, I think, the one thing about being in the coaching world, man, is you spend a ton of time away from your family. You spend a ton of time away from, your spouse. And obviously, at one point I was married. Obviously, for our reasons, whatever, it didn't work out. But I take a step back and I recognize and I realize and I hold myself accountable for, things that, I could have been better at in my marriage, and a big part of it was my time and my presence and, that type of thing when it came down to, I was just so fixated on, being just the best possible coach that I could be, instead of, being present when I was at home, right? And not necessarily being focused on, and more so being focused on what I need to be focused on in my personal life, right? And then, kind of just being able to separate that. And I think a lot of times with, especially is when you're early in your career and when you're younger, you're kind of, and, when you're very, when you have this mindset where like, man, I want to be great, you kind of lose focus of a lot of things. You know what I mean? So I think for me, man, early on in my life and early on in my 20s, man, I think I lost focus on certain things where, in the grand scheme of things, man, like that should have been my focus. I should have been focused, more focused on this. And not to say that I wasn't, right? Not to say that, I didn't get, but it's, again, recognizing where you could have been better, right? It's that extreme ownership.
For sure.
Extreme ownership. And that's, and if you're going to be, and if you are going to be better, then you got to be able to recognize it so that you can fix it.
Gotcha,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
So it's, I think that's the biggest thing, man, is, us coaches, we spend more time with, and I don't have kids, but we spend more time with other people's kids than we do our own kids. And I see this in, our staff and a lot of our coaches that have kids that are married and this, that. And it's so easy to lose yourself. And not just in high school, man, but like you see it in coaching world just in general, man.
Yeah.
And not even the coaching world, but just in the business world
Yeah.
and everything else, man, where, families
For
are broken
sure.
apart because, the balance isn't there.
Yeah. But I've had noticed for sure a pattern in like being a football coach in high school. Like,
Yeah.
that takes so much of your time.
Yeah, it does.
So I can just imagine, that a lot of people go through the same things,
Yeah, no, for sure. And like I said, man, I was, I don't have kids, but I have a ton of respect for, for the coaches who do have kids and are able to balance that. And I love the coaches who bring their kids to practice and bring their kids around the locker room and bring their kids, because the cool thing about that is they're showing our kids how to be good fathers. You know what I mean? Our kids get to see, this, their coach in outside of being a coach, now being a father, and seeing how attentive they are and seeing the love and, everything else that they bring to the table. And man, that's a big thing, cause even like growing up, I remember seeing, some of my coaches, Coach Mack and these guys that would bring their kids around, and you'd see like, man, they're not just coaches, man. Like they're regular ass people, obviously trying to raise a family and do their thing. And you have a different appreciation for that, so
sure.
It's, my hat's off to the, guys like that, man.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's, it's possible because people do it, but in your eyes, like, you feel like it's possible to, knowing what you know now, to, I guess still kind of want to be great in like whatever you're doing and whatever avenue you go down, but be able to make time for like just like your personal life?
You know,
because I feel that's a big question, like
man,
especially
huge.
with us, like just being so young, knowing that there's so many things we want to accomplish and do, but you also kind of, I mean, you want to worry about just like the things that, I mean, just yourself personally, you know,
Yeah,
and things
no,
like
for
that,
sure.
you know.
I think honestly, man, one of the hardest things that I think that you have to figure out as an adult is balance.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Is balance and understanding that, you know, but in all reality, like what is balance? You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Especially like, you know, you talk about the greats, right? Those greats that are going to give up their family time. They're going to give up, you got guys like, you know, Kobe Bryant and LeBron James, and you know, they talk about how much time they spent away from their family. Like what they there was no balance when it came to that. Why? Because they're chasing greatness and they achieve greatness, right? But I think the biggest thing that I've learned, man, is just being present.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like balance may not be, you know, it may not be something that you're able to obtain if there's a certain goal that you're chasing. But I think that if you're able to be present in that moment and where you're at, I think that's you're able to kind of separate yourself there.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So, and when I say that, it's like, okay, hey, if I'm at home, right, I'm gonna do everything I possibly can to be the best father, be the best husband, be present right now, right, you know, right then and there. You know, if we're on a family vacation, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna you know what I mean. And when I'm at work, I'm gonna go all out. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
ball. I'm gonna grind. You know what I mean. And my work may take me away from my family time at times, but when I am there, I'm giving everything I got. And so I think when you're able to keep that perspective and you're able to keep that mindset of saying like, hey, you know what, just being present in that moment and just kind of just, you know, the same way I go all in preparation and watching film and doing this, well, I'm going to go all in and being that bit, you know, that husband, that father, that whatever. And when you can kind of separate that, I think that's kind of what helps.
Mm-hmm.
But man, I don't, you know, if you're really trying to be great, the reality of it is like you're not going to have balance.
Mm-hmm.
You're just not, you know.
Yeah.
But I think just being present, you know, that's the most important thing.
For sure. That's a very good way to put it. Because you can still, like, let's just say the little time you do have, right, that you're at home and you're present. But if you're just still thinking
Yeah,
about
you're not there.
the X's and O's and what the game tomorrow, like, you're not really present.
Yeah, you're not.
You might as well be outside of.
No question. Yeah, you might as well be doing exactly. You might as well not even be there.
Yeah.
You know, and and you're just like kids, man. Everyone recognizes that, man. Like everyone knows what it is. You know, everyone knows when you're present. Everyone knows when you're there, and
For sure.
you feel it. It's an energy thing, and when you're invested in something, right? But yeah, it's definitely a lot of trial and error, man. It's figuring things out, and then it's sometimes it takes losing something. You know, it takes, you know, maybe losing, you know, a marriage or losing this or losing that. And you're like, holy shit, you know, like what really is important right now?
The disparity between these past two seasons is like just insane. You know, you said 1-9, now you're 7-0. So what have you learned from both seasons? One of them being where you guys were losing damn near every week.
Yeah.
And then now I'm sure you've learned also, even though you're doing great 7-0, but like there's also lessons to be had there. So like what are the lessons between the two, you know?
It's that you can't skip steps. It's you know, it's cliche as this sounds, but it's a process. You've truly, not only yourself, but you've got to get your kids and you've got to get teenagers to buy into the process. And what's the most difficult thing to do is to try to convince a 15, 16, 17-year-old that, you know what, hey, we can be great after a 1-9 season. You know what I mean? There's not a whole lot of belief. There's not a whole lot of confidence. There's not a whole lot of, but the way you're able to display that is by showing up every single day, by being present at that moment, at that time, right? By putting in the time and these kids understanding that like, hey, I went through the same thing you did. And now let's do everything we possibly can, right, to get out of this. But it's you know, you got to have buy-in. and it starts from the top. And like I said, it starts from our head coach who, he's the guy that's going to, obviously lead the way and direct the ship. And it's us as assistant coaches that's got to, kind of go and kind of, fulfill his, the grant, his big picture and kind of like his culture, right? Implement that amongst our program. And, but yeah, man, it's none of that happens without relationships. Like none of it happens without relationships. Because if I can't sit there and be vulnerable with my kids, and that's one thing I try to do, man, is the one thing I figured out is, man, you can't take yourself too serious. A lot of times you figure out, like, you say something and the kid will pop off or do this and blah, blah, and then you start to lose your shit and you're like, oh, it's like, man, okay, he's a kid. He's in that moment, whatever the case is, like he probably didn't mean it. Obviously, you want to try to hopefully, try to teach him a lesson to where, hey, man, there's a better way to go about this. But it's also being like, I'm not going to lose my shit. It's like, how can I fix this right then and there to where I'm able to get the most out of this kid, to where I'm not going to continue to lose this kid. Right. And it's putting aside your ego. It's putting aside your pride. And it's putting aside the fact that, like, hey, what do I got to do to get the most out of our people around us? And it's the buy-in essentially is what it comes down to. Because if guys aren't buying into what you're saying, and if they don't believe in what you're doing, and obviously that doesn't come without the relationship and saying, like, man, hey, my coach loves me, and obviously, they know that, you're not going to get it. So I think that was a big thing, man, is we, obviously we went to work and, we definitely, put in the process, but we also kind of just really started digging in the kids. And then we had exit meetings and we asked our kids, man, tell us everything that you didn't like about this season.
Wow.
Well, I didn't like how, this and that. And we wrote everything down.
Damn.
We sat down and we had an exit meeting with every kid in our program. And,
that's amazing.
And we had, every kid's answers, they wrote it down, and then we actually sat down and we talked about it. And we as coaches, after having these meetings, we're like, man, these are all the things that we got to change. These are all the things, and this is what we got to do to get the most out of our kids, because this is what they want.
And there were certain things that they probably all said.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Wow. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. And there's a lot of things where, like, holy shit, like, this is how they feel about us, or this is what they think about us, or we got to change this. And in order for us to create this change, in order for us to get to where we need to, like, we as coaches got to do something about it, right? And it's just like anything else, man. Like, when you become a parent and when you become this and that, like, you got to be able to conform, right? You got to be able to do this and that, because if you don't, then, you're not going to get the most out of your kid. Your kid's not going to respect you. He's not going to listen to you. He's not going to sit there and be like, hey. So, I mean, there's just, yeah, man, I think that was the biggest thing was, just literally starting from the ground up, from the ground up and figuring out what it is that we had to do as coaches to kind of get through to our kids. But it's, the big thing was, understanding where our kids were at. Yeah. Yeah.
And now that everything's going well per se, then what is something you're trying to just like reinforce, or just like things you've learned even just while winning,
It's the process. Yeah. It's like, hey, man, like, we're not going to skip steps. It's still the attention to detail. It's not being complacent, because complacency kills, anything and everything. So, and keeping a 15, 16, 17-year-old, especially with social media and people telling them like, man, you're this, you're that, and, whatever the case is. And, we've all been there, right? You don't know any better. But as coaches, we've been through this before, to where, it's just keeping everything in perspective. It's keeping these kids, kind of dialed into the big picture. And so, I mean, that's really what it comes down to, man. But it's the routine and what we do and how we do it, and we don't change. They know that this is what it is. Not only the routine, but the expectations. It don't matter if you're the best player on the team or the worst player on our team. He's going to hold everybody accountable. We have the best, in my opinion, the best running back in the state. And, we have any other kid in our program that, they're going to be treated exactly the same. And I think everyone recognizes that top to bottom, to include coaches, right? We're going to be treated and we're going to be held to a certain standard. And obviously, as a head coach, you're going to lead and you're going to display that from the top. So, it comes down to having a good leader. And then obviously having the right guys in place to be able to implement your vision. And then, like I said, man, just understanding your kids at the end of the day.
For sure. I think that when you say culture, that feels like it's so much of what determines a big part of what determines like success in a program. Because I'm gonna be honest, that second year, like when Coach Brown left and all them, like I didn't even know, like it seemed like it was just such a drastic change. But now that I think about it, yeah, the culture was just like it seemed like there wasn't, like I didn't know there, I didn't know what we like hung our hats on, you know,
Right.
as opposed to like that freshman year, like there I can turn to things where I was like, oh, this, like if being at Andrews felt like a certain way and this is how it was, and then the next year was just like I don't even know what it feels. It feels like we're just like here, you know. I don't know. It's kind of difficult to put my finger on it, but yeah, it just wasn't. It didn't feel like the culture was there, you know.
You know what it was the family got torn apart.
Mm.
So when we all came from Andrews, there was 7 of us that came from Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was myself, it was Brown, it was Mac, it was Horner, it was it was Taylor. You know, so it was all these guys that we had all worked together, and so we were all successful together, not just at Franklin, but successful together at Chapin. You know what I mean, when we played there. And so it was just that dynamic of a staff, and really that's what it comes down. Like I said, man, you ain't shit without the people around you. It comes down to that. So Brown came in, he had a vision. We all, you know, were a part of that somehow, some way throughout the course of, you know, us before us getting to Andrews. So when we got to Andrews, we were all on the same page. You know what I mean? And so
it was like plug and play, you know.
No question. Yeah, we were all on the same page. We had all been there. We were all like going to have each other's back, and that's just what it was. And then, like you said, whenever you got a new coach that comes in, and you know, he didn't really bring in any of his. You know, I love Coach Wood, man, but he didn't really bring in any of his coach or any of his own coaches. He kind of just inherited guys and then kind of hired guys throughout, and there wasn't a whole lot of connection. There wasn't a whole lot of, you know what I mean, being on the same mindset and the same thing. So that's really what it came down to, was like, man, we were very, very connected. And in any championship team and any successful program, you know, whatever, be a seat company, whatever the case is, if you're connected, that's everything, right? Being connected is everything. And then being connected as a staff, it kind of goes to through your program. And those kids start to recognize, like, man, these guys love each other. Like we were best friends. I got to work with my best friends, you know what I mean, as a young coach at that time, where, you know, and then once we got split up, guys went to San Antonio, guys went whatever. It was a brand new staff. You know, there's a lot of moving parts, and we didn't have that. You know, we weren't connected the way we were when we were whenever we all got there.
Do you feel like it ever got to a point where it was like your time there, or was it always kind of like fragmented?
Yeah, I think it was. It's tough to emulate that, man. It's tough to like. It takes time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's that staff was something that was, you know, when we got to Andrews, it was something that was formulated when I was in high school, when I played for those guys. So I was, you know, maybe I was 22 at that, 23 at that time. So I, you know, 5-6 years removed, but it was a course of X amount of years that we had all been together. We had all experienced together. We all kind of had that same. So
you hung out outside of work.
Outside of work, we love each other. We were each other, like, you know, each other's best men in our weddings and all that other type of stuff. And, you know, so I think what it came down to, not to say that we didn't have good people, quality guys, but I think it came down to the fact that, you know what, that connectedness never transpired. It never, you know, kind of built up. So
damn, yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Like when you put it like that, because as a player, you're just so focused on, like, obviously, like at the end of the day, player has to go and execute, right?
Yeah.
But I think so much, and even with basketball, man, like we had, even my friend, that sucks, dude. I think about both sports. Now that I think about it, it was just, I'm not blaming anybody by any means, but dude, yeah, the I guess the culture and everything was just shifted in both sports, you know, because I mean we had Brown, we had that staff, and that was kind of taken, and then over here we have Coach Lewis leave my sophomore year.
Yeah.
And he and Coach Forbes are kind of been going at it. And, I mean, Gene and it's really just Gene and Forbes. And then Coach Weave leaves. So it's just like towards the end, like, yeah, we were good. We had so much talent and we did pretty well. But, I mean, it was nowhere near our ceiling that we kind of knew we had, you know?
Yeah.
Which is a little bit unfortunate. but yeah, it just makes a lot of sense now that I'm not putting it all on the coaches by any means, but I feel like it has so much to do with that, you know.
And the cool thing about that, like when we got there, was, man, the first thing that Brown did was he and Forbes got together and they did this.
Wow.
And they formed like an allegiance, and they said, and I'll never forget this. They said like, and if I don't know if you remember this, but if you quit football to go to basketball, they didn't allow you to just jump into basketball. You had to wait till the season was over in order to be able to fully participate in basketball. And same thing, if you wanted to quit basketball, you had to wait till, you know, the season was over to be able to come to football. So there wasn't this thing where you were able to quit a sport if we were disgruntled and you weren't, you know, whatever, you know, to go to the next sport. It was like one of those things where it was amongst the head coaches where like, man, this is not what we're going to do. Why? Because we support each other. And if you're not happy in something, like, we're not going to teach you that it's okay just to quit and just bounce. And, you know, because then what are you teaching them? And then, you know, obviously it was, like I said, that connectiveness in itself is what kind of established, like you said, that culture amongst the football and the basketball program. And we had some dudes on the football team that were part of that Final Four, Elite Eight, you know what I mean, Sweet 16 runs. And you know, there's obviously big time players that are part of that football team that are also part of that basketball team. And but it came down to, again, just being connected, being on the same page, right, having that mutual respect for one another. And then, you know, it was one of the things where the kids knew, like, man, we weren't gonna, like, there was no negotiating that, like, this is what it was. So I think that obviously had a big thing to do with it. And then, like you said, once parts start moving, it gets torn apart. And then that's when, like, man, there's a lot of, you know, the success maybe wasn't as, you know, what you wanted it to be, and this and that. So now there's so many factors. And that's why I said it really comes down to a perfect storm. Like, you got to have the perfect storm, you know, and everything just kind of, you know, rolling in the right way. But there's so much that goes into it.
For sure. Well, so, man, what you got coming up next? I mean, you're 7-0, so what, you got 3 more regular season games?
Yeah, we got 3 more regular season games, man. So, you know, we're definitely trying to get through this, you know, this next part of our you know, obviously the tail end of our season, and then headed into playoffs and kind of see what happens, man. But
who you got coming up?
We got Bel Air.
This Friday?
Yeah, we got Bel Air, we got Americas, and then we got Parkland. So
gotcha.
Yeah, we'll finish out this year, and then, like I said, man, it's everything now is about playoff seeding. And, you know, if we're able to finish out on top, then, you know, hopefully that the goal is we finish out with the number 1 seed and you know, host a playoff game here in El Paso, and, you know what I mean. So yeah,
that'd be amazing, man.
Yeah, no, we're excited about it, man. And you know, like I said, these seasons don't come around very often, you know, and so it's about embracing it and enjoying it, you know, and that sometimes you lose sight of that, you know. It was like, I tell people, like, man, I had a 1-9, you know, or what at that time, at this time we're 0-7 stress last year, and now it's a 7-0 stress because it's like, man, keeping it all rolling.
Either way, you're gonna be stressed.
You're gonna be stressed out, but it's a good stress. You know, you put in perspective, it's a good stress,
for
and
sure.
So for sure.
What's that saying? If you're playing during Thanksgiving, then
for sure, that we've preached that to our kids, man, since from the get go.
For sure.
So
hell yeah. Well, man, I appreciate you.
Man, I appreciate you having me, man.
Coach.
Nah, man, I appreciate you having me, man. You know, you obviously, you know what you mean to me, and I'm so proud of you, man. For, you know, like I said, I don't just, you know, consider, you know, especially like, you know, ex-players, and, you know, I don't just, you know, say this about anybody, man, but you're special. You know, you're special in the way you went about your business. You're special in the way that, you know, the heart that you have, and the passion and the drive that you have. And, you know, I know you're going to be successful in anything and everything that you do. And, man, it's, you know, I'm very grateful to have just be a small part in your life, man. So keep grinding, keep doing what you're doing, man. And like I said, man, you know, the sky's the limit for you.
So, means everything, Coach.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, y'all, that is episode 53 with Coach Andrew Macias. Good luck to you this season, Coach. Y'all going to kill it, as you already have been doing. Once again, shout out Brett, man. We're here rooting for you, and you got this, brother. You got it.
Yep. Love you, man.
Yes, sir. Love you. Well, all right then. I'll see y'all next time.